welcome back to another video. It's car setup day. We're getting ready for the night race at Thompson, and it's been a couple of weekends, so we're going to go through a few things in the car and put a full setup in it. And I figured I'd bring you guys along to show you how I do it. So I have already checked the oil and the gear fluid in the transmission, and I checked my valves, and I have a couple of videos on how to do oil and valves, so you guys can watch those. So now we're going to get into the alignment of the car. So the first thing I'm going to do is check toe, and you can see I've already put lines on my tires, but I'm going to show you quickly how to do that again. Just going to grab my jack up the one side, just enough to get it off the ground, and we're going to grab our welding. Oh, camera needs to move. This is a welding chalk, I think is what it's called. You can get these at Home Depot. It's for marking metal for welding, and it's just some type of stone chalk. And this is what I use. I generally use a knife and kind of whittle down a point-ish, but it doesn't matter too much. Anyway, and you can buy, fancy scribe tools that are pretty costly from Longarchy, and they're very nice to use. If you can afford one, grab it. But I just don't see spending the $200 to do this. So just spin the tire, give it a couple of good spins, grab your chalk, hold it up to the tire. It's going to put a nice line on it like that. Now obviously this line is a little wide. It's not exactly precise, but this is a Volkswagen. It's not exactly precise. Nothing on this thing is precise. So I just aim for the middle of the line when I do this, but you can also grab a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver, if you want to be a little bit more precise. Give it a good spin, and then use that flathead screwdriver in the middle of the line. See the black line in the middle of that white line on the left? That will help get you a little bit more pinpoint accurate if that's how you want to be. And I've done it both ways. I just don't really see the need for that anymore. I just aim for the middle of the white line. So let's get the Traml Bar out and check the toe. Alright, so we have grabbed the Traml Bar. The Traml Bar is just this 1-inch square tubing that comes up to about halfway of the tire that I've made myself. One side, I just put a piece of tape on both sides, but I put a fixed line here using a square, and that stays there all the time. And then on this side, we make marks of where our toe is. So I'll show you how we use that. Start at the back, just because it's easier to visualize toe when you're measuring the front as a second measurement. I'm going to line up that fixed line with the center of this white line on this side, and we got to do that usually with the driver in the car, but I'm working by myself, and I've done this enough times that I'm very familiar with my own ride height. In fact, you can get in the car. A little tip is these rubbers that might be on your shocks, or you can put a zip tie on your shock. You can get in the car, give it a little bit of a bounce, see what your ride height is, and then you can just hold the front end down. Whoops, down to those. So we're gonna line this up. And again, you do this with the driver in the car because of bump steer. Bump steer is the wheels turning slightly toe out or slightly toe in because of the front end configuration, and it's really hard to get all bump steer out of the car, so you want to compensate for that. So I'm going to look at my O-ring here, move the shock down to the approximate ride height with me in the car, center my fixed line on this side, okay, and then we're going to come over here, make sure my ride height is correct, and make a mark at the center of this line. Okay, now we're going to take the Traml Bar, back out, turn it 180 degrees. So the fixed line was on this side, now the fixed line is going to be on this side. That way our mark is lined up towards the tire. We're going to center this again at our ride height. So in this case, the white line is out further than our mark. So I made a little mark there with a little square on top. So I could remember a lot of times I put little shapes like this one's a circle. So I can reuse this piece of tape over and over again without having to put a new one on there, and I can remember where I'm at. So we're towed out quite a bit. We don't want to be that towed out. So we're going to adjust the tie rods a little bit to tow it in. So to tow the car in, we want to make these tie rods longer because the tie rods are on the back of the spindle. So if making them longer pushes the rear of the tire out and the front of the tire in, which gives you tow in, or more tow in than where you're at. So you're going to loosen these lock nuts on the tie rods. One of them is backwards, so they both loosen and tighten the same way. And we're just going to turn these a hair on both sides to keep things even. And I just whoops, there goes the Traml Bar. Finger tighten the nuts back down. Okay. All right, now that we've done that, we gotta recheck the toe. Okay, and that is good. So this line next to the circle is the one I made, and we are about a 16th toe out now. And that's what I run on the front end of this car, just a 16th out. We want to run close to 0 most of the time because it gives us less rolling drag, and I find that's just the best way to go. I run a 16th out in the front and a 16th in the rear, or as close to 0 as possible, but always err on the side of toe in on the rear for sure. The front end, because of bump steer, moves slightly. I'll show you if I can. You probably don't see that, but the line will move, or the tire will move slightly more toe out as my front end compresses even more. And that's the way I set it up on purpose to do that. You could have it go to toe in. What you don't really want is it going from one side to the other. So toe out to toe in, or toe in to toe out. I don't think it makes a massive difference unless you have a ton of bump steer, but generally you want it to travel in one direction. So that's it on the front end. Let's get to the rear end. Okay, here we are at the back of the car, and it's the same exact procedure. So I'm going to start at the back of the tire, I should say. I'm going to line up my fixed side, go over to my marked side, make a mark, flip the Traml Bar completely around, look at the car, and line up the fixed side. On the back, we're not concerned about ride height because it moves so little, and there shouldn't be, well, there should be very little bump steer in the back, if at all. Okay, and I can see we are at 0, just absolutely 0. See if you guys can see that. That mark right there, dead center of this white line. And on my fixed side, dead center right there, if it focuses. There we go. So the rear end is at perfect 0 right now, and we're gonna stick with that. Again, especially if you're newer, you might wanna go a hair toe in, a 1/16 in, maybe even 1/8 of an inch toe in on the rear. All right, so after we check our toe front and rear, and especially if you need to move the toe in the rear, you wanna check how square the car is. So we're gonna grab a tape measure, and you can do this in many different ways, but generally I have a helper just hold the tape measure against the axle tube as far out to the casting as I can in the center, and then I measure the front. So today I'm actually gonna hook it on this bolt back here, which can kind of be a fiddly process. And I'm gonna measure to a point on the front end. I use the center of this link pin, the top link pin, to measure. And you can make a mark in the dead center of it, or you can just eyeball it like I do. And I'm just about 84 inches, so 7 feet to the center of that from that bolt. So I'm going to show you how, if you're working alone, you can do this. I hook the tape measure on the bolt itself on my leading arm, because I have a leading arm car. And of course this is going to work for trailing arms as well. So hook it on that bolt, pull your tape forward, and measure to the center of that pin. And that makes sure that the car is square. The front is square to the back. There's lots of people that use a string method or different methods to do this. It's different ways to do it, but that is a quick and easy check. Now, if you did have to change your toe, you want to check that first, because you want to know which way you, or your rear toe, I should say, you want to know which way you should go with this. Because if this side was shorter than this side, and you needed more toe in, then you'd want to make this side a little shorter and not move that side maybe. So you have to figure out which way the rear end is going to go, left or right, to square itself with the front. Because obviously with these bolts and adjusters, you can move one wheel backwards or forwards to get the rear toe right and to get your car square. But in this case, we're already square. So that's the car towed now, squared. Next, we're going to check the rear camber and droop. So let's get to that. All right, to check the rear camber, we're going to want an angle gauge, because we're going to measure the angle of the axle tubes. You should have negative camber, so the axle tube from the center of the car should be going up slightly that way, and on that side up slightly that way, so you have negative camber. You never ever want positive camber. So I have a digital protractor that you can buy these on Amazon, and this just measures angle. As you can see, this way is negative, this way is positive. So again, you want to do this with you in the car, but I have a good idea of what it should measure with me out of the car, because I work alone a lot. So I'm just going to put my digital angle finder on this side. I'm going to hit the 0 point. So it says reference 0. We're at 0 on this side. And we're at 3.4 on this side. And that's with the car sitting on the ground and having to roll a bit. So with me in the car, it's probably going to go up to near 4, maybe 3.75, somewhere in that ballpark. And again, you can't really take that number if you can see it in the camera, because it would have to be re-zeroed on the other side. Okay, if you got to make a change to your rear camber and you want more camber, you're going to shorten these push rods on either side, and you want to shorten those evenly. And of course, if you want less camber, you're going to make those longer. When you drop the car down off the jack, the camber could be kind of in a stuck position because the tires are sticky and it's not going to let the car settle correctly. So you're going to have to roll the car backwards or forwards about 10 feet. You can roll it backwards and then forwards if you have working in a small space like in this trailer. I typically roll the car, like I said, backwards and then forwards a couple of times to let the tires settle to where they want to be. I can get in the car and kind of bounce around a little bit and then remeasure it. Typically, this is better with two people because you want the driver to stay in the car as it rolls. That will give you a more consistent reading, more accurate reading. But you can get pretty darn close just doing it by yourself like I do, by rolling the car and then getting in it and knowing what your total camber change with you in the car will be. If you know your total camber change is going to be 0.3 degrees when you get in the car, you can do it without you in the car and just roll the car and measure the car empty. So, but it's very important that you do that. I've done it myself where I measured camber, I say, wow, it's way off. I make a big change, and then I'm running way too much or way too little because the car just, after you drop it down off the jack, just doesn't the suspension doesn't relocate itself very well. So that's an important tip, and you definitely need to do that. And now we're going to check the droop, which we're going to do by jacking up the car. So the car is on the droop rod, or the rear end is on the droop rod. Now, if you don't know how this zero roll suspension works, this right here, this rod on top, and some cars might have it below the shock, is a solid rod with a rubber bump stop, and this is called a droop limiter or droop rod. So as I jack the car up, the swing axle transmission is going to fall down, but this is going to limit how much it will fall, so it never falls into positive camber. We're going to make sure we're completely off the ground. It's always a good time to check that your rear end is moving freely back and forth, and this should be easy. One hand's movement, no problem. Should have a nice swing. In fact, you should probably drag it up higher than this and make sure it swings more than that. But just make sure your rear end's moving freely. If it's not moving freely, you might have some of these bolts tight, too tight, or heim joints that are bad, other things that you might find in the rear end and preventing it from moving freely. You need to take care of that. So let's take my angle finder again. We'll put it on this side. We will re-zero it, and we'll put it back over here, and we're running 1.6. Try to make it about 1.4, 1.5 for my setup. So we're going to call that a little bit high, and so I'm going to grab a couple of wrenches and we're going to make a small adjustment. Okay, to adjust the droop, we're going to loosen up these two nuts over here. Well, one nut and a locking nut. This side is fixed, so this side will not change, and we need less droop, so we want the rear end to come down a little bit more, so we're going to loosen these nuts to allow the rod to get longer. Probably more than enough right there, so I'm just going to snug these back together. We're going to recheck this. My angle finder on this side, and we're just about zeros. Reset it to 0. Put it on this side, make sure we're nice and flat, and we're at 1.4. Perfect. So you might be asking yourself, well, what adjustment range should I be using here? What should I be running? So generally speaking, you can run droop from anywhere from 0 degrees to say -3. You never want positive droop. And camber, most people will run from say 2 degrees all the way up to 6 degrees with you in the car. I tend to stick to 1 degree and 4 degrees with these spec tires. or right around there, maybe 1 and 3.5. And it doesn't change once you figure out where you like it. You know, it being a half a degree off here or there isn't going to make a difference. Um, you might be thinking that more camber is better, and that's not the case with the Formula Vee because of the swing axle. If you put in 6 degrees, so it'd be 3 degrees on each side, and then in the corner, the rear end squats, you hit a bump, you know, the shock compresses, that's adding more camber. And you can get into excessively high camber numbers, which will make the car looser. Because as the swing axle, as the wheel swings up, the tire contact patch can get smaller because more of the outside tire is being lifted off the ground. And that can make a car snappy loose, and just loose in general. And especially if you're running an extreme amount of camber with even a stiff rear end all the way around the racetrack, you're going to be heating up the inside of the tire a lot more. So you want to get the car relatively flat, so when you compress in the corner, you're into your kind of window of the total camber you want in the corner. So that is basically car setup. So like I said, we've checked our oil level, we checked our valves for the weekend, which you should be doing valves every other weekend. We checked the square of the car, we checked the front toe, we checked the rear toe, and now we checked the total camber and droop. So a little nut and bolt check around the car. We'll clean up the body because she's dirty right now. We got a lot of oil on this thing from last race weekend still. We got to clean her up, get her back on the car, and then we'll be good to go. So I hope that helps some of you guys that have questions about this stuff and are new to Formula Vee and aren't quite sure of how to set up the car, and you know, often wonder what are the fast guys running. You know, I usually run at the front and we do okay. So you know, you've seen my complete setup and the way I do it, exactly what I run. I'm not going to change this off camera before the weekend. That's exactly what I'm going to run this weekend, and I probably won't touch it. So hopefully that helps, and if you guys have any questions, you have my contact information. Shoot me a message on Facebook or email, however you can get a hold of me, and I'll be happy to help you guys out. All right, have a good one.